So I guess that most of you can hear me. So I have the task of keeping you awake just after that lunch. So now I want to talk about one of the projects that I've been working on, and it's the Aadhar project. I guess you've heard of it. And I'm going to tie it into a talk that happened at at the NASCOM Product Conclave earlier this year. But before that, a little bit about me, a little bit of introduction. I'm currently entrepreneur in residence at Costa Labs. This is a fairly new entity, we just got started, so there's not much there. Prior to that, I was the chief product manager at the UIDI project. And before that, at Google, I built and launched a product called Google Map Maker. This was a crowdsourced map product, and we used it to build map data for India and 170 other countries that essentially put all of them up on Google Maps. I have about 20 years experience prior to all of this, and so I have gray hair. So I don't know how many of you were here at the NASCOM Product Conclave about a month ago. Okay, so it's about 20-30%. Did all of you hear Deep Nishar speak that day? So Deep talked about finding product bliss. Now, I know Deep from a long time back. At Google, he was actually responsible for converting me from an engineer to a product manager. I reported up it to him. So when he says something, I have to take it seriously. So he laid out 7 principles to finding product bliss. And even though I was out of the UID by the time he made his presentation, I thought I would go back and see how these features apply to the UID project. And so that's sort of what the title was is Aadhar and product bliss the same thing. So I'll let you be the judge. So let me walk through the features one by one. The first feature that we talked about was know your user. And so in the UID case, my user is all the residents of India, and we have this thing called the KYC process, so know your customer, and we twisted it to call know your resident. And this is what I know about it. I have the fingerprints, or the name, or the father's name, I have the address, and the gender, I know the date of birth. But I guess people are not talking about this. We wanted to get a more broad idea of who your users are, get more information about their patterns, and so on. But again, I come back to this. There's a bit of truth in this that this is what identity data typically means to most of us. When I ask somebody what their identity is, it's really about the name, their family history, where they live, gender, age, those kinds of things. And so in that sense, this still serves as a part of knowing the user. I also wanted to go back a little into the background of the UID. Why did we create the UID project? The primary reason was the difficulty in establishing ID. I don't know, this is a bit of a personal experience here as well. How many of you have, your lease agreements, house purchase agreements, etc., in your name and your wife's name, or just your name? So your name alone. So when your spouse needs a document for a proof of address, like say for getting a telephone connection, is there an issue? Okay, same here. I came back from the US 10 years ago, signed the lease. The only proof of address I had was in my name. So I got a cell phone connection, my name, no issues. I couldn't get one so easily for my wife, so I took a second one in my name. 10 years later, that phone connection is still in my name. And it's, and if this is a problem in Bangalore with somebody who has, lots of IDs and lots of things, just think about folks who don't have any of these. And so, it's a problem. It causes people to be excluded from a lot of the formal systems in society just because they cannot establish that ID. The second part is weak authentication. Even if I have an ID and you're unable to verify it, you're not going to trust it that much. People will come up with fake IDs and will be able to bypass you into the system. And this is a problem with host entries, duplicates. There was this story about how when they, at one point, Karnataka decided to reissue all ration cards. They stopped when they not covered the entire state because they realized they issued more ration cards than the entire population of the state. So, clearly certain people are able to get through weak IDs very easily. And so that causes a lot of other issues. So this is a common challenge. This is pretty much a repeat, but it's a big problem for the poor because there's no way to bypass it. There's no birth records, there's no address proof, they don't have the money or the other abilities to get past that hurdle and access the services. And this exactly leaves a lot of the people behind. So I just talked about some of these, the whole entitlement programs, the problem with those. And clearly all of these are things which the UID starts to address in some way. So those two specific things, the weak authentication system and the process to check for duplicates, are the two things that we address. So in some senses, I know my customer, I know my problem. So who gets a UID? Everyone is eligible for it. If you're a resident of India, you're eligible. And that is my user. Simplicity is a feature. And again, going back to that thought on simplicity, what could be more simple than one person, one Aadhar? It's as simple as that. I mean, there's other elements to it that biometrics don't change, and hence they don't change with time, and they are not common across people. So far in the history of biometrics, we haven't found a case where two people have the same biometrics. And so we use that as a basis to issue Aadhar. But the basic idea is as simple as one person, one Aadhar. The second part is about authentication. You come with an ID, you use your biometrics to prove who you are. Very quickly, it's an online check. You don't need to worry about the Aadhar letter, the card. I mean, everybody asks about an Aadhar card, and really, it's not about the card. Behind the card is a little statement that's printed that says, the card is not a proof of identity, only online authentication is. And online auth is you present your Aadhar number, you present your biometric, we tell you yes or no. We don't give our personal information, and that is the authentication process. So these are the two simplest ways in which we implemented the interface of Aadhar to the resident. Embrace constraints. Now here are very many constraints. You're working as part of the government system, we are constrained by a lot of the processes and policies and the way things are done, but I would sort of take it into a different set of connotations. We defined a bunch of architectural principles to guide us, and we said these are the constraints we're going to live under. Because if we don't violate these, we will pass the test of all the fairness issues and about all of the public procurement issues. Finally, we are spending public money. We have to be accountable to the public. We have to follow these policies and principles precisely for that reason. And so we constrained it even further. We said we're going to have no vendor lock-in. We are going to use open source technologies where possible. Performance metrics will be made public. We'll exclude what is personally identifiable information, but we'll have strong endpoints there. With these principles, we decided to make progress. The first things we did was we actually, again, part of the government, we set up a committee to take certain decisions. So we created a data definition standards and biometric data standards. We got broad concurrence across the government system on these. For the demographic data and address data standards, we had folks from the post office, from the Census Bureau, from Passport, from many other departments and ministries come in and work with us on defining what kind of address data can we collect. And similarly for biometric data, we got people from various, from industry and from various other departments to again help us figure out what we should collect. And then the result you've already seen in McAvoy standards. Data is your guide. Now, this one really, the private sector, you think of, you create a program or a product, you launch it, you collect metrics, you use that to iterate and do that. Unfortunately, a government program, once I've launched it and I've issued you a UID on a certain basis, I can't iterate and issue it one on different bases out there. So we had to have a certain bar to launch. But beyond that, there's a lot of things we could iterate on. And so we actually created a public portal which shows everybody at any given time what is happening around the enrollment rate. If you apply for an Aadhar, you get a little enrollment ID. You can check the status from the web. Internally, we had sort of had a philosophy saying if it's available to the resident under RTI, it better be on that portal. You shouldn't have to ask. It should be there. So that is the kind of visibility we want. And recently we launched a data.gov type of initiative, and a lot of Aadhar data has now started to show up, minus PII, on the portal. So you can actually go to the portal and check that out. For partners who are working with us, and I'm not defining these entities in the talk, but we are a part of the federal system is that as a central government agency, we do not approach folks directly. We actually work with the state government. And the state government also doesn't have folks, so they actually outsource it one more layer. So by the time an operator comes to you, he's already 3 levels away from me. But we have to keep everybody in that chain informed about what is happening. We have to make sure the contracts, etc., are of course standard. But beyond that, what is happening in the field, the processes, etc., and the actual collecting of data from the residents, handing it up the chain back to us, there is full visibility into that process. And we built a portal to make that happen. Operators have to go through training, certification before they can be activated in the system. Again, that is visible. UID applications are going to be out there, so developers are required. There's a developer portal out there working with developers to make this happen. So all of this, we believe, is sort of, the whole sense of use the data to iterate and keep visibility. I think we try to meet with this. So here's the enrollment portal. It shows you what's happening by state. You can drill down to the districts and down to the sub-districts. You get a gender distribution, you get the age distribution of people, and so on. This is my partner portal. It is showing a particular enrollment agency, how much data they've sent to us, what we have done with it, what's the processing, what came in the last few days, etc. That's the developer portal. So we built all of these pieces to make sure that we have full visibility into what's happening as much as possible. And so innovation is not instant. Now, here, a lot of innovation actually requires, it takes time to build things and do them. So I just talked about simplicity. Now I want to show you the opposite of it. That's the system we built. Okay. At the top, there's a little box that says CIDR. That's a central identity repository. It's where all my identity data is sitting. Inside that, we have infrastructure management, we have the application server, we have the biometric subsystems, we have the demographic data, we have the business analytics. All of that sits inside that box that I've shown out there. And at the same time, I have linkages to the registrar systems, to the logistics, which is actually the act of getting data to us and the letters back to the resident. There are the biometric service providers where you have an internal interface. We have a contact center, you call up a number, you can respond to that. They have to have visibility into our data. Authentication, the front-end enrollment systems. So we built all of this. So this is not simple. And we said we were going to use standards where possible, but not every one of the interfaces has a standard in it. So we created that. So where you have a biometric device connecting to an enrollment station. We wanted an ecosystem play. We didn't want to bundle device drivers of a particular vendor into our client software. So what we did was we actually defined an interface. We asked the vendors, please meet this interface, and only then can you participate in this program. At the time of launch, we had 4 vendors. Today, I have 8 vendors selling the same. The competition has resulted in the price drop of the enrollment system. When we launched, it was about close to about 2 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs, and today it's down to about 75,000. So that's only because of competition. We are buying enrollment scanners, the fingerprint scanners we see at immigration in the US. They bought them at $5,000. They're available here for about $35,000. So, we have changed the game in many ways. It's an ecosystem play that, the UID is about the resident as well. On the other side, it's about that ecosystem. We have, biometrics SDKs, everybody writes their own, the function calls are different, there's no standardization. So though the biometric standards exist, there's an ISO standard for fingerprints, iris, etc., but there's no SDK standard, and I needed to be able to swap between them. So we wrote one here, and the same thing on the back end with the automated biometric identification system, which is the one which actually compares your biometrics to everybody else's in the country. We're building the world's largest biometric database. Before this, the largest was about 100 million people, 150 million. We are targeting 1 billion. We were not sure any particular technology to scale. So we actually built an interface across which we put 3 different providers who are competing for each transaction. So that brought the price down, but also if one of them doesn't scale up, we can discard them and bring another one. So we needed a standard interface for that. We didn't want to have to program it. So we built an API out there. All of these APIs are by the way published on the website. We built an authentication API which is for developers. For the authentication devices, there's a specification out there. So all of these things took time. Some of which we had to do before the launch of the program, some afterwards. So like the auth API was launched much later. But the others were done right up front. As a result, we have no vendor lock-in. I mean, there's all the interfaces, etc. in there. There's also one transliteration interface which might be of interest to some folks targeting. Adapt. When we went out with authentication, we found that the acceptance rate was low. We had to bring it up. So we went out and tried to figure out how best to do it. We came up with this protocol called the best finger detection. So at this point, we actually get the resident to provide 10 fingerprints again. We match them and we let the resident know which are the 2 best fingers. And if you use those 2 best fingers, we are down to 98% plus authentication rates, successful true authentication rates, without any chance of increase in fraud. So we didn't actually take the threshold down for the match. We actually figured out a way to make it happen. So the match threshold still stays high, so security is maintained, but at the same time, user convenience is accounted for. To do this, we did a POC study. We did 50,000 residents worth of data across the country, 20 plus devices, over 300,000 impressions collected, tested, and there's a report on that which is actually on my website as well. This was the last point that they made. You have to believe that you can do it. Before we started, we knew the challenges were there. And 1 year from launch, we did have the world's largest permanent database. We crossed the 100 million mark first week of January this year, and 115 a little later. Yesterday, we were 22.7 crores, that's 227 million, and 1 in 5 Indians is an Aadhar today. So, that's something we believed in, we've been able to get it there. But that's just the start. For it to be successful, we have to cover the entire country. And that's going to take a little bit of time. Also, it has to be used. So that's the next step. When we use identity to deliver a lot of services. And that's that we're starting on that journey now. I'm not part of it. This is something I've done before. I'm proud of what I've done, but the journey goes on. So, thanks.
We have questions for questions.
Yeah.
Identification.
That's true.
They have nothing.
That's true.
So how do these people get an UID?
So there are 2 ways that we've addressed that. One category of folks who don't have any documents are people like my wife I mentioned in the initial days, where because the document is not in her name, she cannot use that. So we actually allowed the head of family to introduce them, provided there was a single document that contained both names in it. So a lot of people have ration cards with a photo on it of the head of the house, and for the rest of the folks, just the names are in there. So as long as that person is willing to vouch for the rest of the people on the ration card, we allow them to get an Aadhar number without the required proof of address, etc. And there are the second set of people. I mean, I'm partitioning it. The biggest number is actually this, of people who don't have documents, is actually people in families where somebody does have an ID. The second set are the folks who are nomadic, people who are houseless, people who don't have a valid address because they don't have a valid house, right? So that is a category which we have tried to work through special drives running through, like in Delhi, we actually did a lot of special drives running through the civil society organizations who run places which provide shelters for them, and the address of the shelter was then used to actually provide them with an Aadhar. So we're trying to do these outreaches to make sure that folks who would otherwise be left out get covered. But it's a slow process. It's not as straightforward as I would like it to be, but we do that.
Okay, so what I have noticed is as far as these people without any addresses or IDs are concerned, that they are not included in anybody's ration card.
True.
And they don't have any fixed address.
That is true.
And a very easy way to classify these are people who go from city to city or village to village working.
No, migrant workers are a different category. Migrant workers typically have a document relating to the place they're migrating from. The people I'm talking to about are the very disadvantaged folks who do not have anything. I mean, so for those who are working with civil society, for the migrant workers, there do exist organizations that help them get an ID and so on. So the migrant worker problem is slightly different. A lot of them actually do have a ration card back home with their family, etc. on it. They will not be carrying it when they're working, but they do have all of those documents.
So there's no way of an employer introducing somebody.
So there is a concept called an introducer, which was the next step, which is actually what we used for even the civil society guys, where somebody who is recognized by the state government as an introducer can introduce somebody saying, I know this person, this is his name and address, and so on. But unfortunately, for various reasons, that has not picked up steam. But we do have that provision in our software and in the policies.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjay, thank you for showing us how product management can be applied to the country's biggest product. And that's really a fascinating insight. Small summary from